My name is Sarah, and for years I carried a secret so heavy that it nearly crushed me. I lived in my mother-in-law's house, a place where every smile hid daggers, and every word was a silent war. But what no one knew was that I had won millions in the lottery. I didn't tell anyone, not my husband, not my in-laws, not even my closest friends. Why? Because deep down I wanted to see who truly cared for me when I had nothing. I wanted to know if my family stood by me, or if I was just a servant in their kingdom of cruelty. What followed was a storm of betrayal, humiliation, and darkness that no one could have predicted. My mother-in-law, oh, she thought she had me cornered. She thought she could strip me of dignity, of respect, of love. But she had no idea the quiet daughter-in-law she mocked every day was holding the power to destroy her world. And when I finally decided to take revenge, I made sure it was slow, unforgettable, and devastating. This is my story. My name is Sarah, and the first time I stepped into my new home as a bride, I thought I was stepping into the beginning of a fairy tale. The house was big, painted with shades of old tradition. Every corner smelled of spices, incense, and a history I didn't yet belong to. My husband held my hand, but it was a cold grip, distant, like he was already slipping away. I remember my mother-in-law's eyes the moment she looked at me. She smiled, but it wasn't the smile of welcome. It was the smile of a queen measuring her new servant. Her words were sweet, but her tone cut deeper than a knife. This house has rules, Sarah. You'll learn them soon. The first days were tolerable. I cooked with shaky hands, trying to impress. I cleaned, I smiled, I bent myself into shapes I didn't even recognize, just to earn a nod of approval. But approval never came. Instead, my mistakes were counted like coins. The rice was too soft, the tea too bitter. The way I folded the laundry wasn't their way. My husband watched. He never defended me. He'd simply lower his eyes, as if my humiliation was invisible. I told myself, maybe it's just the beginning, maybe they'll accept me with time. But time did not bring acceptance. Time sharpened their knives. Family gatherings became the stage for my silent suffering. The relatives would come, the laughter would echo through the halls, and my mother-in-law would pull me into her cruel theater. She'd say, "Oh, Sarah, she still doesn't know how to cook our family's dishes. She's learning." And the room would fill with soft chuckles, the kind that slice open your dignity. I would smile, my lips trembling, my heart screaming. I would run to the kitchen afterward, pretending to wash dishes so no one could see the tears burning down my cheeks. Nights were colder than mornings. My husband slept beside me, but the bed felt empty. When I tried to share my pain, he said, "She's just trying to teach you. Don't take it personally." But how could I not take it personally when every lesson was a dagger aimed at my worth? Days turned into weeks, and slowly I felt my voice fading. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. Silence became my only shield. I thought if I gave her no resistance, she would grow tired of tormenting me. But I was wrong. Silence in that house was blood in the water, and my mother-in-law was a shark. She grew bolder. She would lock eyes with me across the dinner table, a small smirk curling on her lips as if to say, "You'll never win here." And perhaps in those early days she was right. I had no power, no allies, no place to escape. I was the stranger inside their kingdom, living under rules written in cruelty. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I carried a secret bigger than all their laughter, all their mockery, all their schemes. I had millions sitting in silence, just like me. And though I hadn't yet decided to use it, every insult, every wound, every sleepless night was pushing me closer, closer to the moment when I would stop being their victim and start becoming their Worst nightmare! That moment was not here yet, but it was coming. It began with whispers, small poisonous whispers that slithered through the walls of that house like snakes in the dark. I would walk past closed doors and hear my name carried on hushed tones, my mother, in Law's voice dripping with false concern. She doesn't know how to handle money, she spends too much, she doesn't fit into our ways. At first I ignored it. I told myself maybe I had imagined it, maybe she wasn't talking about me, but deep down I knew. Every glance, every cold smirk she threw at me in the dining room told me exactly who the target was. One evening, as I carried tea into the living room for the guests, I heard her laughing softly with my husband. I froze at the doorway, hidden in the shadow. Her words cut me like glass. Your wife is careless. She doesn't belong here. You deserve someone who knows how to run a house properly. Look at her. She doesn't even respect our traditions. And my husband, he didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just sat there nodding, letting her venom seep into him drop by drop. I realized then that the battle wasn't just me against her. It was me against them. Days later, the betrayal grew sharper. Relatives came over for dinner, and as always, she prepared her stage. I served the food, trembling, hoping for one kind word. But she looked at me with those cruel, glittering eyes and said loudly for everyone to hear, "Sarah tried cooking today. Poor thing, she just can't get it right. We had to fix it after her." Laughter erupted. Not cruel laughter, but the polite, pitiful chuckles of people enjoying someone else's humiliation. My cheeks burned, my hands shook as I clutched the serving tray, and my husband, he smiled. He actually smiled, as if agreeing with her. I wanted to scream, to shout, to run out of that house and never look back, but I didn't. I swallowed my pain like poison, knowing one day it would burn its way back out. Then came the night that confirmed everything. I walked past her room late, the door slightly ajar. I heard her voice, low and sharp, speaking on the phone. "Don't worry, I'll make sure she's out of the way. This house, this family, it's mine to control. She's nothing." Her words echoed in my chest like thunder. She's nothing. That's what I was to her, a shadow, a nuisance, a burden. And still I stayed silent, because my silence was not weakness, it was patience. Every humiliation, every betrayal, I carved into the walls of my memory, like tally marks counting down to something greater. But that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something dangerous. My husband was slipping further away. My mother-in-law's poison was working. He no longer looked at me with warmth, only with suspicion. The man who once promised to stand by me had become her weapon. I clenched my fists under the blanket, tears streaming silently into the darkness. That house wasn't just a prison anymore. It was a battlefield. And I was surrounded. Still, I held on to my secret, the millions I had hidden, the truth no one knew. I thought of it like a dagger, sheathed but sharp, waiting for the moment I'd finally draw it. What my mother-in-law didn't know, what not even my husband knew, was that the woman they thought they were breaking was already planning her rise. And soon, very soon, they would see exactly what happens when the quiet one stops being silent. There comes a point when pain doesn't even need words anymore. It sits with you at the dinner table. It follows you into the kitchen. It curls up beside you in bed. That was my life inside that house. Every morning I would wake before the sun, hoping that maybe if I worked harder, cooked better, cleaned faster, smiled brighter, they would treat me like a human being. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. My mother-in-law had a gift for cruelty. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her weapon was humiliation, disguised as advice. "Sarah, maybe you should watch how your sister-in-law dresses. She knows how to please her husband. Or, you're too slow in the kitchen. You'll never manage a household this way. Always said in front of others. Always said with that smile that dared me to answer back. And my husband, he had grown colder than winter. He began to look at me the way his mother did, not as a wife, but as a burden. When bills piled up, when money grew tight, he accused me of wastefulness. I begged him to believe me, that I wasn't careless, that I wasn't lying. But he only sighed, shaking his head, repeating words I knew weren't his. They were hers. Sarah, maybe you just don't belong here. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything, to tell him about the millions I had hidden away, the fortune they couldn't even imagine. But instead, I stayed silent, because what good was wealth in a house that measured worth only in obedience? There were days when I barely ate, not because there wasn't food, but because every bite felt poisoned by their contempt. Nights when I lay in bed, my face turned away from my husband, tears soaking my pillow while his breathing remained steady, uncaring. I wondered if he even noticed any more when I cried. The walls of that house became my prison. The living room, filled with their laughter, became my courtroom. Every gathering was another trial, another sentence handed down by my mother in law's smirk. I learned to keep my eyes low, my words few, my emotions buried deep. But silence has a cost. It eats you alive from the inside. I felt my anger boiling, locked behind the bars of my ribs. Sometimes I would catch my reflection in the mirror, red eyes, trembling lips, a face I barely recognized, and whisper to myself, "Endure, just endure." Then one evening I asked my mother-in-law for help, not money, not kindness, just a little understanding. My husband had scolded me in front of her, accusing me of carelessness with our finances. I turned to her, desperate, thinking maybe just once she would defend me. She looked at me with that cold smile and said, "If you cannot handle simple things, Sarah, maybe you don't deserve to be a wife at all." Her words shattered me. In that moment, I realized I was utterly alone in that house. No allies, no compassion, only enemies wearing the mask of family. That night, I sat in the darkness of my room, the moonlight spilling across the floor like silver knives. My body shook with silent sobs, but my mind was no longer just grieving. It was calculating. Because pain is powerful, and mine was sharpening into something far more dangerous than sorrow. And though they didn't know it yet, every tear I cried was watering the seed of revenge that was already taking root deep inside me. Soon that seed would grow, and when it did, the entire house would feel its thorns. The night of my breaking came quietly. There was no shouting, no fight, no thrown plates across the kitchen. It was silence, thick, suffocating silence, that finally opened my eyes. I sat alone in the dark hallway, knees pressed to my chest, listening to the faint hum of laughter from the living room. My mother-in-law was entertaining guests again, telling stories about her family, about her home, as though I didn't even exist. My husband sat beside her, nodding, smiling, basking in her approval. I realized then that I was invisible. Not a wife, not a daughter-in-law, not even a human being, just a shadow that served tea and endured mockery. And yet, within that invisibility, I discovered something powerful. They had stopped watching me. They no longer cared where I went, what I did, what I thought. To them I was defeated, broken, harmless, but I was none of those things. I remembered the letter still hidden in the lining of my old suitcase. The lottery ticket, the numbers I had checked again and again, my trembling fingers confirming the impossible truth. I had won. Millions, enough to rewrite my life 100 times over, enough to burn down every chain they had wrapped around me. That night I pulled it out again. I unfolded the worn paper, smoothed it with my hands, and stared at the numbers glowing faintly in the dim light of the lamp. My heart raced, but this time not from fear, from possibility. I whispered to myself, "You're not powerless, Sarah. You never were." The next morning I began to watch her differently. My mother-in-law, the self-proclaimed queen of that household, every word she spoke, every habit, every flaw. Suddenly I wasn't just enduring them, I was studying them. I noticed how her eyes lingered on jewelry, how her hands clutched at expensive fabric, how she boasted about status in front of relatives. She was greedy, greedy for respect, for money, for control, and greed is a weakness. I stopped crying behind closed doors. Instead, I smiled when she mocked me. I nodded when she belittled me. She mistook my silence for surrender, but in truth it was preparation. I was sharpening my weapon in secret. Even my husband noticed the shift. One evening he asked, "Why don't you argue any more? Why don't you complain?" His voice held suspicion, but I only smiled faintly and said, "Because I've learned my place." He believed me. She believed me. They both thought they had finally broken me. But inside I was building something far stronger than their cruelty resolve. I started making small moves in the shadows, quiet visits to the bank, discreet phone calls when no one was around. Late nights, I would draft plans in a hidden notebook, every page another step toward their downfall. Because revenge, I realized, is not about shouting, it's about patience. It's about waiting for the moment when your enemy is too confident, too careless to see the storm that's about to consume them. And in that house they were blind. They thought I was their servant, but I was already holding the keys to their destruction. That night I lay awake with a new kind of silence, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of strategy. My tears had dried. My fear had withered. What replaced them was something far more dangerous, determination. And as I stared into the dark, my lips curved into the faintest smile, because soon, very soon, they would learn that the daughter-in-law they mocked was no longer their victim. She was becoming their executioner. Revenge doesn't begin with fire. It begins with a whisper, with patience. With a smile so convincing that even your enemies believe you've surrendered. That's how I began. I made myself smaller, softer, invisible. I played the obedient daughter-in-law. I laughed when she mocked me. I lowered my eyes when she scolded me. I thanked her when she handed me scraps of dignity. And she believed it. My mother-in-law thought she had won. But all the while I was sharpening my blade not of steel, but of silence, of money, of strategy. I knew her weakness, greed, status, the endless hunger for more, so I fed it slowly, carefully. I pretended to confide in her one afternoon, telling her in a hushed, trembling voice that I'd heard about a friend who had a business opportunity. I made it sound uncertain, desperate, almost like gossip. Her eyes lit up. She leaned closer, hungry. The seed was planted. A week later I slipped and left a brochure on the table, something I had designed myself, printed in secret with the millions I had hidden away. It spoke of an exclusive investment, guaranteed returns, limited seats. I watched her read it, her lips curling into a smile she thought I couldn't see. She asked questions, of course, and I answered them with carefully rehearsed stammers, as though I was too naive to understand what I'd found. The more I played the fool, the more convinced she became that this treasure was hers to steal. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. She approached me one evening, her voice dripping with false kindness. "Sarah, give me the details. I'll handle this for you. You don't understand business like I do. Let me take this off your hands." I pretended to hesitate. I pretended to trust her, and then I handed her the rope she would use to hang herself. She poured money into it. Not hers at first. She manipulated my husband, convinced him this was their chance to secure the family's future. I watched him nod, just like he always nodded to her, blind and obedient. They scraped together savings, borrowed from relatives, even mortgaged a piece of land. All of it went exactly where I intended, into my hands. The satisfaction was indescribable. Each day she grew more arrogant, boasting about the fortune she was about to multiply, mocking me for being too simple to understand real wealth. And each day I smiled, knowing the trap was tightening, until the day came when the papers arrived, the ones I had arranged. Official-looking, stamped undeniable, the business had collapsed, the money was gone, all of it. The wails that erupted in that house were unlike anything I'd ever heard before. My husband shouted, demanded answers. Relatives gossiped, and my mother-in-law, my proud, merciless tormentor, collapsed onto the floor, clutching her chest, screaming that she'd been betrayed. But the irony was this: she had betrayed herself. Her greed, her arrogance, her endless cruelty, they had blinded her. I stood in the corner, silent, watching, not with tears, not with pity, but with a calmness so deep it frightened even me. Because I knew this was only the beginning. The real revelation, the true storm, was yet to come, and when it arrived, it wouldn't just strip her of money. It would strip her of everything she thought she controlled. That moment was close, very close. The house was no longer filled with laughter. It echoed instead with chaos shouts, arguments, accusations. Relatives who once gathered to feast now came only to whisper behind closed doors, pointing fingers, gossiping about the fall of the mighty matriarch. I watched it unfold quietly, my husband pacing the halls, clutching his head, demanding answers his mother could not give. My mother-in-law, once the queen of this kingdom, now sat in her chair like a shattered statue, her eyes vacant, her pride stripped bare. She still didn't know, not yet. She thought it was some scammer, some stranger who had fooled her. She had no idea the real storm was standing right under her roof. The day I revealed myself, I made sure the entire family was present. A family dinner, tense and heavy, with plates untouched and silence thicker than smoke. I stood up, my hands steady for the first time in years, and I said, "There's something you should all know." Every eye turned to me. My husband frowned, my mother-in-law sneered as if preparing to silence me again, but I didn't falter. I was never as weak as you thought. I began, my voice didn't shake. It rang out through that suffocating dining room, slicing through the air. You mocked me, you humiliated me, you told me I was nothing, but all this time I was holding millions. I won the lottery years ago. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. My husband's fork clattered against his plate. My mother-in-law's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her face turned pale, as though the walls themselves had betrayed her. Yes, I continued, pulling out the documents I had hidden for so long. I never told you, because I wanted to see who you truly were when you believed I had nothing, and you showed me. You showed me your cruelty, your greed, your betrayal. The room exploded. Relatives gasped. Some leaned forward, hungry for the drama, others pulled back, ashamed. My husband looked at me with disbelief, almost begging me to say it was a lie. And my mother-in-law, she collapsed back into her chair, her hands trembling as she whispered, "No, this can't be true," but it was. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You destroyed yourself. I only gave you the rope, and now everyone sees you for who you are." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of rage. Rage at losing the power she clung to so desperately. rage at being exposed by the woman she thought was beneath her. I didn't stay in that house. That night I left. Not with shame, but with pride. Not empty-handed, but with everything she tried to strip away from me. Dignity, respect, freedom. The mansion I moved into wasn't just walls and windows. It was proof that silence can be sharper than any sword. Proof that revenge, when served cold, is unforgettable. And as I stood by the window of my new home, looking out at the world that was finally mine, I whispered to myself, that day my silence ended, and so did her power over me. If you felt every word, if you saw yourself in my silence, my pain, and my fight, then don't let this story end here. Subscribe now, because every tale I share carries the fire of truth, the sting of betrayal, and the taste of justice. And remember, silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means the storm is just beginning.